The sun had barely risen when young Whitmore stepped out of the tiny mud brick house he called home. The air was crisp, and the dirt road beneath his bare feet was cold, a sharp reminder of the life he was born into. The village was quiet except for the distant cries of a rooster signalling the start of another day. Whitmore was no stranger to hunger. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. He had learned long ago that complaining wouldn't put food on the table. His mother, frail but determined, was already up, boiling what little porridge they had left. His father, a worn-out man with hands hardened from labour, sat in the corner preparing for another long day in the fields. "Whitmore," his mother called gently, handing him a small bowl of porridge. "Eat, my son, you need strength." He nodded, taking the bowl carefully. It wasn't much, but he was grateful. Some days there was nothing at all. He ate quickly, knowing he had to leave soon. His father placed a rough, calloused hand on his shoulder. "Son, you must learn this now. Life will not hand you anything. If you want a better future, you must work for it." Whitmore looked up at his father's tired eyes and nodded. The words settled deep in his heart. As he walked to the fields barefoot, the rocks and twigs poked at his feet, but he didn't complain. He had made a vow. One day, his children would never feel the pain of hunger, of cold feet, or of uncertainty. One day they would have everything he never did. Years passed, and Whitmore kept his promise to himself. He worked harder than anyone else, taking on extra labour, saving every penny, and slowly climbing his way out of poverty. He learned to trade, built a small business, and eventually he no longer worried about his next meal. When he married and had a son, Henry, Whitmore's heart swelled with determination. Henry would never suffer the way he had. From the moment Henry could walk, Whitmore provided everything he could. New shoes, warm meals, a bed with soft blankets, things Whitmore himself had never known as a child. One evening as they sat by the fire, Henry looked up at his father. "Papa, why do you work so much?" Whitmore smiled, running a hand through his son's hair. "Because, my son, I want you to have a better life than I did. You will never know hunger, never walk barefoot, and never feel the pain of struggle." Henry didn't fully understand, but he nodded. Whitmore believed he was doing the right thing. He was breaking the cycle of poverty, ensuring his son lived a life of comfort. What he didn't realize was that by removing struggle entirely, he was also removing the very thing that had made him strong. Henry grew up in a world of warmth and security. He never had to worry about food or shelter. His father's business flourished, and he attended the best schools. While his father had once worked in the fields barefoot, Henry walked in polished shoes on paved roads. As he grew older, Henry admired his father's success. He saw how hard Whitmore had worked, but he never truly understood the depth of the struggle. When Henry became a father, he remembered his father's sacrifices and made a promise of his own. "My son will have even more than I did." And so, Edward was born into a life of privilege. Private tutors, fine clothes, extravagant vacations, he had it all. Henry had been given comfort, but Edward was given luxury. Whitmore, now old and grey, watched this from a distance. A quiet worry settled in his heart. He saw how Edward had never had to earn anything, never had to work hard for what he wanted. "Henry," Whitmore said one day, "be careful not to make things too easy for him." "Sigwa," Henry laughed. "Father, isn't this what you wanted, for us to never suffer?" Whitmore sighed but said no more. Edward's world was one of ease. Every wish was granted, every desire fulfilled before he even had to ask. He never had to work for anything. By the time Edward had his own son, Theodore, the pattern continued, but this time something was different. Theodore was born into unimaginable wealth. He had nannies, chauffeurs, and anything he asked for. He never lifted a finger. He never struggled. He never learned resilience. One evening, Theodore sat with his father, Edward, scrolling through his phone. "Father, why do people have to work? It seems so unnecessary." Edward chuckled. "We worked hard so you wouldn't have to." Theodore shrugged. "That's good. I don't think I could handle it." Edward felt a small sting in his chest. His grandfather had walked barefoot. His father had worked tirelessly. He had managed his father's wealth, and now his son didn't even know what work was. Then the storm came. Edward's business collapsed overnight due to a financial crisis. Investments failed, debts piled up, and suddenly the wealth that had sustained the family for generations was gone. The grand estate was sold. The luxurious cars were taken. The servants left. For the first time in his life, Theodore had to walk. He had to work. And he didn't know how. Standing in front of a simple apartment, Theodore felt lost. He had never had to take care of himself, never had to struggle. The smallest inconvenience frustrated him. One evening, as he sat in the dimly lit room, he whispered, "Father, what do we do now?" Edward sighed. "We rebuild." Theodore frowned. But how? Edward had no answer. He had spent his life ensuring Theodore never faced hardship, and now, when hardship came, Theodore had no idea how to handle it. And so, the cycle had come full circle. Sitting in the small apartment, Edward finally understood what his grandfather had once tried to tell his father. The man who walked barefoot worked, so his son wouldn't have to walk. That son worked so his child wouldn't have to struggle. That child worked so his son would never know discomfort, and that child, having never struggled, never learned to survive. And so his son walked again. Edward placed a hand on Theodore's shoulder. "Son, I made a mistake. I wanted you to have everything, but I never taught you how to earn it. Now, we start over, and this time, you will learn." Theodore looked at his father, confused. "Learn what?" Edward smiled sadly. "Resilience, gratitude, discipline, survival skills, the things we lost when we removed struggle." And so for the first time in generations, the cycle changed. Theodore learned to work, to struggle, and to survive. Because comfort doesn't build strength, struggle does. Moral of the story: struggle builds strength, while excessive comfort can lead to weakness. True resilience, gratitude, and discipline come from overcoming hardships, not avoiding them. Providing for the next generation is important, but teaching them to stand on their own is the greatest gift.